How do we grow this influence of black leaders, men and women, that can represent our industry inside the ANC, inside the policy-making structures?
Get to grips with the digital environment, put together best practices, what works and what doesn't, very importantly.
In the project that we're doing in Chaplat, we've created a linking bridge between those two little areas there. So it becomes a matter of just 10 minutes walk from one side to the other.
So my message to our CEOs and those chief investment officers is, where at the end of the day do you want to see your role?
So by treating all of our water back to a stage where we can bring it back into the process, we're in effect saving around about 35% of our water usage on site.
Welcome to greeneconomy.tv. I'm your host and facilitator, Byron McDonald. Today, we have another episode of the Circular Economy Show. So today, we're also speaking about electronics in the Circular Economy Network. So if you want to comment and engage, do so, because we have professionals on site. Of course, our regular guest, and that's Chris Whyte, Director of the African Circular Economy Network. And he will be going in conversation with Gordon Brown, Green Economy publisher of the Publisher Journal. And of course, we can't forget the intelligent Nolwazi Mbhele. But before I bring on our guests, like I say each show, greeneconomy.tv provide insight and intelligence on all sustainability related matters. So let's bring on our guests. Hey guys, how are you?
Hi, Byron.
Hello, Byron.
Excellent. Good. We're back, and we're speaking about electronics, something that we're using, something that's in use at this moment. So, Chris, you're the professional, and Nolwazi always has that brilliant questions, and Gordon, of course, also. So I'm going to let you guys get it started.
Great, thanks very much indeed, Byron. And we've had some wonderful conversations with Chris and our guests, and Nolwazi, myself, and Byron have really learned a great deal around circular economy. This week, as we've come to do, is to zoom in from the big picture stuff to understand what is circular economy, what's the thinking, why is it important globally. In South Africa, we're now looking at various sectors and zooming in onto some of the detail there. And so this week we're talking about electronics and the circular economy. And frankly, electronics has really just become part of our lives in every respect. And Chris, I won't give away our age, but when we started in business, there were relatively few electronics. I mean, I remember things like the fax machine and terrestrial television and a few other things that come to mind. Nowadays, I mean, I've got we've got wearables, we've got cell phones, we're speaking on computer right now. I mean, I walk into my kitchen now and the fridge has got electronics. I mean, it's electronics are just everywhere, and that's just consumer electronics. I mean, we start to think about electronics at a commercial, industrial, even military scale. It really one starts to understand the scale of this industry and the amount of materials that are flowing through in the value chain that relates to to electronics. So, Chris, my opening question to you is, that's all great. Is there anything wrong? I mean, why are we having this conversation about circularity in economics? Talk us through some of the problems that have emerged as a consequence of how things have been handled. Explain to us at first, really at a global scale, about the flow and the movement of materials and how that's creating issues at the moment.
Yeah, it's quite a big issue. Globally, we're looking at around about 65 million tons of electronic waste that is produced annually. South Africa, we're probably at about 360,000 tons. That's about 6.2 kilograms of electronic waste per individual. Obviously, that is going to depend on at which level you are in terms of your income, but on average, 6.2 kilograms is quite significant. But it is every part of our life at the moment in terms of energy. So we have massive flows of electronic waste that are now moving globally as well. So what we're finding is that there's a huge amount of e-waste that is flowing from the likes of America and Europe and coming to Africa. So places like Nigeria and Ghana are inundated with this electronic waste that's coming through, and it is regarded as hazardous. Electronic waste has lead in it, it has cadmium, it has other components of problematic waste or materials that we need to manage to end of life. So we've got to look at all these different issues and understand that, if we look at electronics as we have now, most of them, basically anything that was run with energy, whether it's through a battery or through electricity, is electronic waste. Now we're even producing our energy with electronics. So now we got going wind power and solar, and it's all electronic waste. It has a lifespan, so that's going to come to end of life. We have electric vehicles that are taking over. That's also going to be e-waste. So it's not just your iron or your laptop or your cell phone. We are constantly increasing the amount of products that we create in this chain. But then we also need to understand the global complexities and the global power struggles that are happening as we speak in terms of securing those materials. We've seen aluminium and copper dramatically increase in price over the last 6 months at the highest prices ever because of the demand in terms of green energy and the green economy. And it comes down to not just that, but rare earth metals. China at the moment, I think, controls 70% of the globe's rare earth metal supply. And that is a big issue from a security and perspective globally. So those are issues as well. And yet we're not recycling the materials. So we're throwing away a lot of products where we have tantalum, niobium, platinum, gold, silver, other precious metals that we are throwing away with our printed circuit boards. And we've got to take those into the system and recycle those. Otherwise, we're going to keep digging big holes in the earth to find more minerals that we can plug into our new electronics.
Yeah. So, Chris, staying at a global picture level, what is the role or the potential for things like extended producer responsibility? And I'm asking that in the context of internationally, the industry, whilst it's massive in terms of the amount of products moving around, isn't it true that there's relatively few companies? I mean, we could probably name most of the retailers or the manufacturers of computers and TVs and so forth, but even the suppliers of components, I'm thinking of people are making, you mentioned the motherboards, the smart chips and so forth. It's a relatively concentrated industry. And yet I've personally seen these very awful images of, entire villages, either in Asia or you mentioned in Africa, where, the villages is dedicated to, dismantling and stripping out the valuable components of electronics with massive social and health impacts on those villages. What's happening globally amongst these massive corporations that are worth billions to really take responsibility for the way that these things are dealt with?
We are seeing a change. It has come probably too little, too late, but I think that there is a global push at the moment to understand the issues and the complexities around electronic waste. So we have extended producer responsibility. We have directives within the United States, within the European Union, looking at the issues around design, circular design, making sure that we try and ensure that we keep these materials in the cycle for as long as possible. But also we're starting to see that movement in Africa and Asia. So there are organizations, we were working with one recently, Closing the Loop, a Dutch organization doing some work in Nigeria, The UNDP, United Nations Development Program, is doing some work in terms of understanding how we can look at extracting maximum value from the e-waste sector. There's work that's continuing in Ghana, another big hotspot for e-waste. And South Africa, obviously, there's a big focus now with our current extended producer responsibility regulations that were promulgated in May this year. So we are seeing big moves, and we're seeing alignment with the international world as well. And it's not just the big producers. So yes, it would be a smaller pool if you compare it to packaging, for example. It would be easier to track the value chain and see who the players are in the electronics market. But then we've got to understand the full market value from the lithium that's being mined in the DRC through to whoever's shipping that to Europe or the States, the guys who are manufacturing the batteries, the different printed circuit board components, and then the different metals and the different types of plastics that go into it. And in plastics, we're talking 16, 17 different types of plastics that go into electronics. And again, those need to find a responsible end of life as well. So we've got to look at unpacking all of those different components. And yes, it's probably a little bit more complicated than we think it is. If you look at the fact that vehicles, as a prime example, would have a whole string of suppliers into that process. And a lot of our cars now, it's not the case of changing the spark plugs. You need to change the computer before you can change the spark plug. So there's all sorts of different things we need to understand from that supply chain. It is very complicated. But it is easier to track down than the packaging sector, for example. So we are seeing a number of initiatives. There are global organizations that are working on it, Partnership Action for Green Economy, Partnership Action for Circular Economy, and the big one is the World Resources Forum. They are working through something called the Sustainable Recycling Industries, or SRI program. I'm part of the SRI program at the moment, now working in South Africa. They're looking at 5 global countries, Peru, Ghana, South Africa, Egypt, I can't remember the other ones. And we are looking at the issues around understanding secondary resources and getting those back into the system. And we need to work together because they're complicated. If you look at the composition that goes into electronic waste, it's not just the high value products, which we have a cherry picking sort of society where we are pulling out the copper and the aluminium. We've got to look at the problematic waste streams, and the plastics are problematic. If you look at the old CRT screens, those are going out of fashion. Everything's flat screens at the moment, but there's glass. There are brominated halogens that are fire retardants that go into those plastics. There's all sorts of different problem waste streams, and we need to identify the opportunity in terms of separating those out and getting them back into the system, as opposed to constantly looking at the linear model of finding new materials and plugging in for new products. So there is a lot of work that's happening. We've got a long way to go.
True.
No, thank you very much.
Chris,
Byron, go ahead.
Yeah, I just had a question there. I understand that the investors and academics and so-called leaders in this field needs to assist for this to work in the circular economy. But how can the normal consumer play his part also? Because he doesn't create the products and these things, but how can he play his part also to assist? Because I know a lot of these guys are going to speak about we need investors, we need academics, we need maybe lawyers in these fields that are leaders to help the circular economy. But for the normal consumer, I would believe there's a way they could assist in the electronic side or so. And what would that be?
Absolutely right, Byron. I mean, the big issue, as we say, we've got 360,000 tons of e-waste in circulation in South Africa on an annual basis, and only 12% of that is recycled. And the main reason is people don't know what to do with it. There aren't enough e-waste recycling drop-off centers. There's not enough collection in terms of what's happening. And we have other complicated issues. For example, the asset management issues from government sector, where they hang on to these computers long after their economic lifespan has completed. And there are warehouses full of old computers and electronics that should be going through certified and compliant processing centers. So we need to look at being able to make it easier for people to direct electronic waste into proper processing facilities. And to that end, there's a lot of work that's being done. So one of the things we're doing with the Swiss State Secretariat for Economic Affairs through the SRI program is identifying and developing an app where everybody knows cell phones are a problem, but everyone knows the cell phone. So develop an app which can identify the waste stream, but not only identify it, but to track and trace that waste component, so that the brand managers or the manufacturers are able to report back on where that product goes to. So the ability to take things through the value chain is very important in terms of providing the facilities, in terms of collection and drop-off, in terms of the infrastructure that's required for the separation management of that, or the refurbishment, which is obviously a big opportunity in Africa. And then to drive those products to an end-of-life system where we are looking at maximum valorization of the different components through the waste streams. And there's a huge amount of work that's been done in terms of that. So we have two PROs here. We have ERA and IWASA doing a great job in terms of informing and educating people. But there's a lot of people who don't know about it. And the good thing about the extended producer responsibility is it allows one to then widen the net. Previously, what's happened is we've had responsible organizations like Dell and HP and Whirlpool and some of the bigger manufacturers and the brands that we know, who've come in on a sort of a voluntary network to show their producer responsibility. With the extended producer responsibility, that note goes way beyond that. So now we're looking at everything. We have directives not only for electronic waste, but we need to focus on problematic waste streams. What do we do with batteries? We have no nickel, cadmium, or lithium battery recycling facilities in this country. And the economics aren't there because we're not collecting the product. So even though people like myself would take my batteries and my lights to a Woolworths or a Pick and Pay, where there are specific drop-off points for those, very few people do that because they don't understand A, the impact of their waste, and B, the opportunity as to where they can take it. And things like compact fluorescent bulbs are a massive issue. They contain mercury. You can't put it into your general waste. It's actually illegal to put a light bulb into your general waste because you're putting mercury into the landfill site. People don't know that. We've got to get people educated and get them to understand their impact, but then also to provide and work with the retailers, the importers, the brand managers, to look at developing the collection mechanisms where we can gather the 360,000 tons that we have, and then look at scales of economy in terms of bringing in the right technology to add value to that.
Yeah,
thank you for that one.
Nolwazi, do you want to weigh in at this point, please?
Okay, so I believe that one of the ways we can try to minimize waste or negative impacts on in the environment is through legislation. How far is South Africa, in implementing this, or any other African countries? I know you mentioned EPR Act in South Africa, but like how far is South Africa in those practices?
In Africa, probably leading the continent. I think in terms of extended producer responsibility, we're not the first. There are other systems across Africa. I know in Nigeria, they're busy developing EPR directives, and I think they're available in Ghana and Kenya. But we need to look at understanding how we drive that whole concept through. So it's not just a simple case of looking at the policy around the e-waste. There are other applications we need to look at. So we need to understand the waste stream. And a prime example is that in South Africa, e-waste is classified as hazardous waste. Now, the bulk of operations in terms of refurbishment and dismantling, probably the most dangerous thing that could happen, the most hazardous thing, is if you dropped a laptop on your foot. Otherwise, it's not going to be of any problem unless you start looking at thermal processing and or chemical processing of those materials. So again, we're working now with the World Resources Forum and the Swiss State Secretariat through the SRI program to look at designing and developing policy around looking at the different factors of the e-waste stream. So looking at the problematic issues, but also understanding where we are from a policy perspective to be able to encourage collection, but also to drive opportunities for proper, controlled, managed, certified recycling. And and also to understand that we need to look at it further than that. So we need to look at it from our import and export opportunities through our international trade agreements. We need to look at working with the Basel Convention, which we are a signatory to. We need to understand that landfill directives are vitally important. We need to ban e-waste from landfill. It should be illegal. There should be policies in place where it needs to be directed to the right spot. So there's a lot of work that needs to be done to connect the dots. And that's really what is in the process. Things are happening. We've got a long way to go. But each of these will drive and work together with making the EPR systems more successful, but then also to unlock opportunities in terms of beneficiating those materials locally and create local jobs, and offset imports and look at skills and job creation. So there are huge opportunities, but we need to look at a collective collaboration with all the different partners to work together and make it happen.
Yeah, thanks, Chris. And that's something I'd like to talk about now is what can the future be like? I mean, as we begin to solve these problems, as we begin to bring through legislation around extended producer responsibility, what's going to happen now is we're going to end up, one hopes, with many more tons of specific types of waste, perhaps sorted better, transferred better. Firstly, what can producers do? And I think that EPR will drive this. What can producers do to make their products easier to recycle from a design point of view? I'm talking about design for dismantling and stuff. Is that a key thought process that's part of this circular economy thinking? And to what extent are companies actually looking to advance this idea of design for dismantling and recyclability in your experience, Chris?
There's quite a bit happening. We've got a long way to go, but there are certain directives that are being developed across Europe. And again, we're looking at the sharing economy, and the idea would be to manufacture a washing machine that's going to last 20 years. And that you don't buy the washing machine, you would actually rent the washing machine from the service provider. And then when it's finished, it goes back to the service provider, and they have to either reutilize whatever components they can, or adapt it and fix it. And we're seeing that in across the board. So things like computers and cell phones are a prime example. There are so many brands of computers. I mean, I think we know the top 10 or 12 of them. But if you look at cell phones, I don't know about you, but I've got about 20 old chargers stuck in my drawer at home. What do you do with them? Why don't we have one standard charger for everyone? And that's why we've got to move away from this linear model, where people are looking at their own market and their own systems, and they protect that through looking at their peripheral sales. So peripheral sales around your cell phones would be, for example, the camera components and all the rest of it. But instead of upgrading your phone every 2 years and buying a brand new phone at some silly price, why can't we just unplug that camera and plug in the new camera? So looking at that sort of modular design is coming into the thinking process, where you can upgrade the motherboard in your phone. Any of you with an Apple knows that the batteries are a major issue and you can't get the damn things out. So how do you replace a battery? How do you look at ensuring that the provider looks at the right technology, that they can provide a warranty that's going to make sure that battery lasts longer, so that it's not designed to die after a year, so that you've got to get a whole new phone? And those are issues which we're starting to see come to rest. The directives have noticed that, and they are putting in circular design and design for recyclability perspectives into that. So we need to be able to engage with that. We are obviously a little bit further behind where the European Union is, but we can piggyback on some of the work that they've done and look at driving the whole perspective from a recyclability component. We can't continue to keep digging holes in the earth and extracting raw materials. We can't keep throwing away those raw materials without recycling them. So there's a lot of work that's going into that, but the design is a critical one.
100%. And Chris, I know I'm hogging all the questions as usual, but Just one more question from my side relates to this. You mentioned opportunities. Are we going to see a whole range of new industries that don't really exist, or which only exist on the fringe presently? I mean, I'm thinking about, Elon Musk talking about an industry to recycle lithium-ion batteries. You and I have had many conversations about things like pyrolysis and gasification. What sort of industries do you see emerging in order to beneficiate these waste streams?
There's a lot of work that's happening in terms of sort of the 4IR type application. 3D printing is a massive opportunity to be able to look at recirculating those materials. As I said before, if you look at electronic waste, the amount of plastics that are in electronic waste is ridiculous. We had one we stripped a couple of years ago, and there was 19 different types of plastics in that system, and then half of them weren't marked, so you didn't know what they were. So again, the design perspective, make sure that you have the proper plastics in there, that they're marked, to be able to then recirculate those. And the idea would be to, if we separate out sort of a polyamide or a PVC and be able to recirculate that back into another component in an efficient process through 3D printing to create the new components for the next systems from the old components. There are massive opportunities from that. So, from a job perspective, at the moment, you've got this massive tonnage of material that's going to landfill that could create thousands of jobs. And we need to embrace those opportunities. How do we look at either hydrometallurgical or pyrometallurgical extraction of the 17 odd different precious metals that you have in printed circuit boards and get those back into production? So we're not exporting circuit boards like we do at the moment from South Africa because we don't have the facilities here, but rather produce those facilities here locally and extract those metals. So there's a lot of opportunities in that, but we need to just pull them all together and collaborate.
Great stuff. Byron, Nolwazi, can we throw it open to you guys, please? Go ahead.
So you kind of asked the question I wanted to ask, Gordon. So I'll just kind of structure it in the way that I would like an answer. So from my point of view, yes, we're doing all these things, but what's the economic benefit for these guys moving forward also, working on electronic eco circular system? What's the economic benefit moving forward? Will there be more jobs creation, reusable stuff? Because, investors, that's their first question they ask before they take part in such a thing.
It's a very good question, Byron. And, the reality is that this is why we want to embrace circular economy, because it does create those jobs. It does create those skills. And it creates secondary economies that weren't there before because we were just throwing it away. So the opportunity is definitely there. That's why we know that there's a lot of different technologies. We're starting to see it already here. There's some great organizations in South Africa that are looking at value-add components. There's Green Office and Greenable who take the high-impact polystyrene from printer cartridges and then mold that or injection mold that into a computer stand, an ergonomic computer stand. So we want to look at more applications like that. Some of the plastics can go into other applications. They can go into shoe heels. One company we worked with has created guttering systems from ABS, which is another problematic e-waste plastic. But we want to be able to get people to understand, particularly the metals, and I think there's a great opportunity there because we cannot continue. It costs more and more and more to mine gold. As you know, our gold mines are getting deeper and deeper, and gold is more and more expensive and becoming less and less readily available. And yet we're throwing away a huge amount of gold in electronic waste. E-waste has, I think, I may be wrong, but I think it's about 10 times the concentration of gold per kilogram in e-waste than you would get in any gold mine. So why are we not pulling that out? And looking at the opportunity then in terms of the electronics guys, yes, it makes economic sense because these products are becoming rarer. They're becoming more expensive. There are international and global politics going on in terms of control of resources. So we need to maximize the use of the stuff that we're throwing away and rather bring that back into circulation. And it makes a lot of economic sense. It's a lot cheaper to get gold from e-waste. If you look at the Tokyo Olympics, all of the gold medals are made from e-waste plastics. E-waste circuit boards. So let's make maximum use of what we've got.
100%. We're almost out of time, but I'm just going to ask Nolwazi, do you have another question for Chris? And then we'll wrap it up after that. Thank you.
Okay. Chris, so you mentioned in the beginning that solar panels are also considered as e-waste. So my question is, if it is considered as e-waste, why are we pushing for solar panels? And also, can they be recycled? Or is it just going to be another problem afterwards?
Wow, you just opened up a can of worms there. It's there's a lot of research and work online that shows that the carbon footprint of green energy is probably just as bad as coal. I would say that the difference is that you're not digging big holes in the ground for the coal mines and then burning it and all the rest of it. But we've got to be very careful in terms of understanding the footprint of what we're looking at. Solar panels have a lifespan of 25 years. Then they need to go back into the system. There are wind turbine graveyards in Europe where they're burying the glass resin polymers that they're made out of because they have no use for them. So we are looking at developing clever systems, looking at either extracting or recovering the energy, or looking at chemical recycling to be able to recover those materials and get them back into the system. And there's a lot of good technology development at the moment. Much of it may not be economically viable in South Africa currently, but we've got to drive that process forward to ensure that we get the materials through and use the different systems and alternative treatment technologies to extract as much value as we can out of that. But it is an issue if you start looking at the carbon footprint of clean energy. It's not as polluting, and we've got to remember that. So, we don't have to breathe in carbon dioxide and sulfur dioxide and nitrogen oxides and all the other nasties that come out of coal mining. So you've got to put that into the play as well. But we are looking at that globally. If you look at electronic vehicle design, for example, they're now looking at a system where literally when your batteries need replaced, you can go into a garage, you lift the car up, in 5 minutes, you've got a whole new panel of batteries in there. And those go into a recycling system and get reactivated and converted back into utilization. So it is in the minds of particularly the greenies out there. We've got to make sure that we do walk the talk and not just say, yes, it's green. We need to solve those waste problems as well.
100%. And what a tantalizing opportunity. And hopefully that'll become the next big industry as we work to beneficiate these waste streams. So that's all the time we have today, folks. And I'd just like to say a huge thank you, as always, to Chris Whyte for your thoughts. So to Nolwazi Mbhele, thanks very much for your questions. And thanks, as always, to Byron, who looks after us in the background and keeps things moving. So thank you from me. And next week, we'll have another show, 1 o'clock Wednesday. And we'll publish the topic for that show in the next day or so. And with that, I'm going to hand you back over to Byron. Thank you very much indeed. Goodbye from me.
Bye, guys.
Bye. So as we say, each week, greeneconomy.tv provide insight and intelligence on all sustainability-related matters.